Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's virtual event. This is Strengthen Your Organization's Collaborative Power while Maximizing Your Microsoft Investment. My name is Janice, and I'm going to be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name and/or email address may be viewable by other session participants in the Q&A panel. By joining, you are agreeing to this experience. Attendees may access the event recording via the same registration link that was used to attend today's live broadcast. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session. I'd like to thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now on to the live event. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have a Global Partner Lead for Microsoft Teams, Sandy Walker. And joining Sandy from Tata Communications is Global Solutions Specialist, UCaaS Solutions for the Americas, Ash Poonawalla. So without any further delay, Sandy, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Janice, as ever, thank you so much. You're the best moderator we work with, so thank you again. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's call. As you've heard, I'm the Worldwide Partner Lead for Teams. I speak to a lot of partners about their capabilities and their plans to enable Teams in our customers' estates or your estates. With that in mind, I'm really pleased to be here with Tata Communications, as they're one of our most capable partners globally, and I'll be sharing today's session with Ash. So without further ado, let's dive in. Well, it's been an interesting year. We can say no more than that. The world has changed a lot in the last 12 months. You, our customers, have had to transform at an incredible pace just to keep working, keep up with your customers, and keep up with your employee needs, and/or even just keep operating. We already know about new business models that you can see on the left-hand side. We knew about the need to reassess our operating models to drive further digital efficiency, but this was then only accelerated like we've never seen before. This global pandemic we've been living through has required us to respond even quicker. Us as a technology vendor, Tata Communications as a technology partner, and you as our end customers having to kind of operate in these difficult times. Some of the historical stats we have are things like people like Gartner, well-respected kind of consultancy, saying that 74% of businesses are still intending to shift some employees to remote work permanently. So as you can see, the world is changing, and we're changing how we operate, and we'll discuss some of these things as we go on. So when we think about things like remote work, we think about the employee and adapting to the employee needs as well. This remote working needs a different infrastructure, needs a complete infrastructure. We don't need just basic chat anymore. Our employees are demanding more, and they need a more enriched experience to maximize their productivity. Even today, about 75% of our enterprises or end customer enterprises still have their unified comms voice estates on premise. But this is shifting very quickly. And a lot of that is down to their business needs, or your business needs, and your employees' business needs as well, to be more productive in these unusual times. Now, we want to enable that agility in the workplace, but it has to be end to end. It has to be easy as well, easy for you to deploy, easy for you to manage, but also easy to get the adoption and change management out there as well, and make sure our employees understand it and want to do it as well. Otherwise, we've all got barriers against the change. But more importantly, when you start to look at the right-hand side of the slide, we need to have an infrastructure and productivity tools that are in place, ready for that bounce, ready for that economic bounce that we're all hoping for when we come out of this. If we look at all of these aspects together, we can drive out some of the costs from an infrastructure perspective. We can provide a more robust and secure user experience while giving you that platform for growth, giving that platform to collaborate and use it as a growth enabler or growth engine within your organization. You can see here that some of the basic pillars behind some of this that enable that. So, yes, we've talked about new ways of working, and that's dynamically, constantly changing. The way we operate at Microsoft and the way we'd recommend you operate as well is actually to get, for some of these more complex workloads that sit around Teams, and this is what we'll talk about, some of the things we'll talk about today, is actually, for speed of market and for agility and for ease, think about the right partner, think about a trusted partner. And that's why we're here today talking with Tata Communications. And then think about how people, how you can think about accelerating your digital transformation and how Tata can help with that. And Tata Communications can help with that kind of overall, from the base level of the infrastructure right through to your employee productivity. And you can see some of the words on there at the bottom of the screen that kind of bring to highlight some of the kind of the challenges that we have. So what is it? What are we talking about then? So what's inside the box when we think about Teams? Well, first of all, a lot of you are using Teams at the moment. We've gone through incredible growth rates for Teams. At the last count, or the last publicly announced figures we talked about over 115 million daily active users of Teams. And a lot of those people are using chat and instant messaging. But it's more than that, and we can do so much more. You gain so much more value from this as a tool. So yes, we can chat, but then we have a great meeting experience as well. It's not just a great meeting experience, but it's also a great meeting room experience as well. So we can build on that and make it even easier when your employees come back to the workplace. We know that in some parts of the world, people are already back in the workplace, but in many parts of the world, people are not back in the workplace. And they've got used to using tools like this, not only Teams, but there are alternatives out in the market, and they'll be much more demanding around actually what tools they use when they get back to the physical workspace. So we've got that meetings experience, but then also it's not just meetings, it's obviously then other services, and we'll touch on this, as I said, kind of greater detail today around things like, the phones, basic communication tools, the phone system or the telephone or the voice behind Teams as well. So it's, kind of all in one. But importantly, when we think about the value stack, is the further integration into your business. Obviously, Teams being part of Microsoft 365, works seamlessly with all of your 365 stack. But more importantly, we can think about other lines of business applications that can be integrated into this. So you may have a non-Microsoft product or workflow that you need to surface up through Teams. So you can use Teams as that window pane into your work life and into your work environment. But also, think forwards, how else could you drive efficiency? There's a lot of low code, no code opportunities out there. It might be something as simple as a bot for your HR department. How could you surface some of these through Teams to drive a little bit of efficiency? And we'll come back to some of those efficiencies just in a moment. But importantly, underpinning all of this is then that enterprise grade security and compliance that sits behind all of this to make sure that you are safe and secure in what you buy and what you service and what you are getting integrated by people like Tata Communications. Okay, but importantly, you're not going to do this unless it stacks up commercially. That ROI and that business case is essential. I've worked in end user organizations, I've worked in partner organizations, and I'm loving working at Microsoft. And it's so I've seen all sides of the conversation. And so if the business case doesn't stack up, you won't do it. It's real world. But we have some really interesting stats that sit behind all of this. Just even, if we pick on some of the voice perspectives here, we are looking at how, using things like voice within Teams, we can actually really drive a lot of savings. Employees can save time by having, using voice within Teams. It's that end-to-end collaboration platform. So a small example here is some of the highly mobile workers, and this is a report that we have commissioned by Forrester. We annually update this report on an annual basis, and we can share this report out in the IM later on, or in the Q&A later on, to make sure that you've got the links and you can read it fully, because it's a really interesting report. But for example, of a sample of customers, we have highly mobile workers, those that move around within an office. Those types of workers can generally, of course, these are averages, can generally save, at least an hour and maybe an hour and a half a week, just because they have better access to voice calling. But then other workers that can save, on average, they've been saving 38 minutes a week by improved call quality, system performance, and all the kind of the softer stuff around it. And so all of these all of these kind of savings are additive. And so when we look at the kind of the composites behind this, from the kind of the partners, the end customers that we interviewed, or Forrester interviewed on our behalf, we're looking at kind of the average savings, and there are obviously slightly larger organizations, were over kind of $6.4 million, and the numbers stack up. And so the quantifiable benefits are there. You can see that kind of the ROI of kind of over 260% and payback under 3 months once live. So the numbers are there, the stats are there, and we've seen this time and time again because, as I mentioned earlier on, huge growth rates, and we've seen a lot of this and experienced a lot of this. But interestingly for me, it's not just all about that hard financial benefits, which are generally all you can within the business case. I get that. But it's also some of the kind of the softer or not some of the non-quantifiable benefits as well that's interesting to some of the other stakeholders within your organization. The easy example is improved security and compliance. There is a value to that. You can attach that value to that yourselves within your organization. But also then more interesting things around things like the kind of employee experience. That has a value as well. And one of the fun stats that's also come out from some of the Forrester reports is actually how employees are operating. And this is a stat from about a year ago, to be fair. But it's talking about the average worker and how they were, once they were using Teams and Teams more fully deployed, including voice and meetings and things, actually the number of physical clicks they made on a mouse or mouse pad was reduced. So the average employee was, I think originally was clicking about 4 times less per movement on their kind of business workflows. It sounds like a fun number, but we can all do that quick bit of math. 4 clicks per employee. Multiply that out per by kind of work process on a daily basis. Multiply that by kind of the number of work days in a year. You soon start to add up to, yes, a lot of clicks, but that's a lot of time as well. A lot of time, a lot of efficiency, and importantly as well, a much cleaner and better employee kind of end experience. So it's not only about the employee experience and the overall kind of end-to-end collaboration tool. It's about kind of where then start to think about kind of moving up the value stack from a value perspective and a return perspective. So we just mentioned voice. So when we think about that, we have multiple choices on how we communicate, and it really is down to the end user. And this is so suitable, and this slide is really talks to where we are today. So kind of anywhere, any device, anyhow. It's freedom of movement, freedom of choice, freedom of the ability to communicate on the right device in the right way at the right time. So it's it's all encompassing from an end-to-end perspective. So if we now just double click into this one a little bit further, we can see that the Teams is really all encompassing, especially when you build in voice and meetings around this. So yes, on the left-hand side, we can simplify that end experience. That primary number you have follows you on your preferred devices. You can choose how you answer, and you can switch seamlessly as well. This is something I do a lot. So I'll maybe start a Teams call on my mobile device. I'll get back to my physical desk in my home environment, obviously. And then seamlessly move that to my desktop because that's more comfortable for me, and vice versa. If I move away, I can seamlessly move to my mobile device. It's easy for me, and it's seamless, and it's hidden to the to your people you're talking to or your audience as well. So it's really is super intuitive and a very easy experience. So we can do that all in one across any devices. But then also from a development perspective, the experience you and your employees are gaining is just improving all the time. There's a lot of R&D, a lot of investment that goes into this, and this is only accelerating, particularly on the back of our experiences around things like your experiences and your feedback and the partners' feedback. We get a lot of feedback from Tata Communications around what they're seeing and what their customers are seeing as well, and then we can accelerate developments thereafter. So whether it's building in, further improving that rich calling experience, or building in new features as well. We recently had the Microsoft Ignite conference, and you may, if you have seen that, then you'll have seen some new features that are coming, and simple things that actually, some of the simple things that I love to see is especially around things like presentation modes. A lot of us are doing presentations more and more at work. And so the ability to give a better experience to your end viewers, I guess, from a presentation perspective. So all of these things are going through rapid development, rapid changes, just to make your life easier and easier. So the amount of development and changes going on in the background is key. But more importantly, around all of this is actually the ability to then manage this. So it's not only around that kind of how to make it easy to use for your end users, but you running this, if it is you running this on your customer side, or if Tata Communications is running it as well, the ability to manage it. So to make, have a simple management structure and a simple support infrastructure as well. So all encompassing, and especially when we think about a voice and a calling perspective, it's it's front of mind for us to further improve the experience that we provide to you as our customers through partners like Tata Communications. So it's so busy times, rapid times, and when we think about this across the different spaces, and it's important to think about actually, and this is moving forwards to actually when we start to think about the return to work, is we think about our individual spaces. That could be your office environment, your home environment. So actually, how does that work? And then how do we move from that kind of individual space to that shared space? So that group space or that collaborative space. And when we do that, then actually, how do we think about the things like, simple things like the devices? So all of these modalities are, designed for that, for that quality end user experience, that security, and that ease of use from the outset. And most importantly, and sometimes people forget this, is that inclusivity behind this as well. So that meeting or collaboration experience has to be good for everyone. Some people are less abled in differing ways, and Teams has the ability to include those people much more effectively. We have a lot of development going into this to make sure that every type of person, every type of user has the best possible experience. And we're not only talking about from the knowledge worker down to the frontline worker, because yes, obviously they have different requirements, but also then people who may have sight challenges or hearing challenges. There's things that are always happening and being developed on the back of this to make that inclusivity better and that collaboration better. So it's as I say, it's a really busy time and a very exciting times around all things Teams. So with that in mind, what we wanted to do was switch it up a little bit. So just before Ash and I have a quick conversation around things that are top of mind, I'm going to quickly hand back to Janice, because we've got a couple of poll questions we'd like to ask you and our audience, just to get a bit of feedback. So Janice, over to you quickly.
All right, thank you, Sandy. All right, everyone, I have shared my screen here and I have the polling questions up on the screen. If you could go ahead and navigate to menti.com and enter the code 8211247, we'll go ahead and get started with those polling questions. So the first one is up on the screen. Do you have a project for MS Teams? You can go ahead and read through those answer options. And we will give it a couple of minutes here for people to navigate over there and get that answered. Again, you just want to navigate in a browser to menti.com and use the code. Enter code 8211247. Starting to get some responses now. We'll give it just another minute or two for people to get over there.
I'm liking that answer. 100% yes.
100% yes.
Ash, you're going to be busy.
All right. Give it just a couple more moments here, and we'll move on to our second one. All right, getting a couple more answers coming in. Okay, they're trickling in.
Cool. And what was the next question, Janice? Because that'll
All right.
Show that one. Yep.
Okay, so moving on to the second one. 1 second here. There we go. How would you describe your role? Are you a decision maker, an influencer, or a researcher? Again, we'll give a couple moments for people to make their selections. There we are.
Cool.
All right.
This is, and we can, I think, Janice, is it fair to say we can see these results ourselves, and so we can maybe, Ash, at the end, maybe give an update on some of the answers?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
All right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to hand it back over to Ash to continue on.
Perfect.
Janice, if you wouldn't just mind turning the screen off, I think we'll have our videos up.
Perfect. Yep, it's back to you, Ash. Cool.
All right. So, Sandy, so what are the key trends? I wanted to ask you this. What are the key trends that we are seeing out here in the marketplace? I just wanted to see that. I mean, that you see.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Good question, Ash. So from our side, obviously key, I mean, stating the obvious is work from home. And it's, kind of, that's obviously the biggest one over the last 12 months, but then also, and then how people are operating as well. So video is a key thing here. And this, I want to go into a couple of, there's probably a couple of points around video. That video has become more pervasive and the new norm. People are a lot more accepting of video, but also a lot more demanding as well. So a couple of things I'll throw in here around kind of a bit of research we've done. So things like the number of video screens on a page. Initially, we were designing teams around 3x3 videos, the video boxes on a screen, but people were demanding more, wanting more, and so we developed 7x7 video and things like that. But then we've taken it the stage further, so we can now, as I mentioned earlier on, prioritize the speaker, prioritize different parts to make the experience a little bit better. So kind of video is a big trend that we're seeing from a work from home perspective. But also then in the background, the general drive and readiness for the next stage of economy is also there. So we're spending a lot of time, actually we're spending a lot of time with you at Tata Communications around actually what's next from a developmental perspective. So actually, where do we go? How do we make things easier for our customers when they get back to work? I mentioned, the bot earlier on, but it's wider than that. So we think about Teams as a platform. One of the big trends we're seeing now is not only about that collaboration space, but how to integrate other workflows into that. And what I love about it is the fact that we can develop and use Teams as a platform. So we can build in generally your line of business applications into that to make it easier, quicker, smarter for your employees to use things, but also then just drive a lot of efficiency. So I will go back to that phrase I used of seeing Teams as that window pane, and that's really one of the key trends that we're seeing.
Yep.
And then quickly, the next big one is getting ready for the workplace. So actually, how are people then thinking about the next stage of collaboration once they get back to that physical space? And so the change will be, instead of individual spaces, to that collaboration space. They're probably top trends at the moment for us.
I think you're hitting the mark, right? I mean, like from our side, what we see is there is like work from home is here to stay. It's not going to go away.
Yeah.
And more importantly, you mentioned about the reduction of the costs, right? I mean, through the slides you show like the number of clicks that you go through. It
Yes.
does. I would like to get a little bit more into the details. How do you achieve this cost efficiency without actually losing enough productivity?
Yeah. That's the golden question, Ash. So a lot of it is around some simple stuff, consolidation. Consolidation of legacy assets. This costs money. It can be expensive. These days, it might not necessarily be fit for purpose as well, or in some cases, not being used. I've spoken to quite a few end customers who've got legacy assets or legacy PBXs that pretty much are sat not being used. They're not truly fit for purpose for this day and age. So their employees have got a mobile, and they might be on a mobile or a cell device only because the PBX isn't fit for purpose. So that asset is sat gathering dust and is costing money. So it's things like that in the background. So consolidation of those legacy assets, but also getting the scale right as well. I mentioned earlier on kind of knowledge workers, frontline workers. Your end customers, or your everyone out there today, your end users, end employees are different. You will have knowledge workers. They may be blessed with having $1,000 laptop, but they might be frontline workers. They might be on a mobile only device, and those use cases are different. So you should scale and build for the personas. So not everyone, as you may hear from my British accent, I can talk about maybe a car analogy. Not everyone would need a Rolls Royce. Some people need a Mini, and Teams can cover all of that. So it's kind of a fit for purpose, or it can fit to the right type of person. And then the important thing as well around the kind of cost side of things is actually how is your space changing? I think that's the other big one that we're seeing publicly, and I think everyone's read probably some of these press announcements. For example, some of the big banks globally are saying, to your point, Ash, work from home is here permanently. There will be offices, but actually they're changing their offices. They're changing that. What is that building? Changing that building, changing the purpose of that building, and also reducing footprint or reducing real estate. So some of those things can be all combined together to drive that cost kind of under control whilst improving that whole experience.
Yeah.
So actually, I'd be interested, Ash, because the way you guys operate, this is one of the things I love about Tata Communications, is you are pretty much everywhere. So what are you seeing as the challenges on a global perspective? Because I know there's going to be some challenging areas. Not every country or every area is super easy to work in.
Yeah, there are three key challenges that we see on the global side, right? The first thing is compliance. We all know Teams works everywhere, but is it compliant in China for all the use cases? Is it compliant in India for calling purposes? Middle East, even in the United States, are there any compliance related to the telco? So they need somebody who understands the global perspective on compliance. If there is an audit, will we be willing to come in and like run an audit with you? So that's one. The second piece is, consolidation of multiple systems in a smooth way. People have like legacy systems and they have invested heavily into that, and our customers do understand they have sweated it out. But now it's come to a point, we cannot just have a cutover, like a very hard cutover. They need a smoother migration, and they need partners to enable that rather than feeling that, whatever assets you have, we just need to dissolve them. So that's another one. And all in that, they need a single trusted vendor. They need a vendor who scales globally. And this is where we come into the picture. So I'm going to share a few slides out here in my screen that talks through us, who we are as Tata Communications. Tata Communications, we are headquartered out of India, a 10,000 user company. And we have built a company out of infrastructure. And we started up with a core network that expanded at a global scale. And one of the best kept secret in the market is 30% of the global internet route goes on the backbone of our network. So we have subsea cabling that I'll cover in the next few slides. We have cables that go across the globe, twice the globe. And on the back of the network, we even run voice. We are the carrier of the carriers that covers more than 55 billion voice minutes a year. That's the economies of scale. And that's why we are a carrier grade company. So what through this infrastructure we have achieved is that we have empowered over the last few years some of the next generation products that we drive in the market. IoT, for example, we power smart cities globally, mostly in the APAC region. We have live streaming of sport events, security, compliance, colo facilities, name it and that. And our partnership with Microsoft dates back a few years from now, back from the days of Lync to Skype for Business to Skype Online and now Teams. We have been a gold partner with Microsoft. And with that, I would like to share with you one of the customer challenges that we have seen as we have partnered with Microsoft. This is a financial services enterprise customer, roughly 25,000 users distributed globally. And one of the biggest challenges that they had was a divestiture. And when you have a divestiture that companies, it's one of the biggest events that the company has seen. The clause was they would have to let go of the data centers that house the communication platforms. And that meant the time was ticking from that point on. So how did we address that problem? I'll cover with you in the next few slides that also shows our capabilities on how we did that. So direct routing for calling was a no-brainer for us because Microsoft and us work very closely together, and we understood that Teams is the way to go for their digital transformation journey. But we still needed to enable the back engine of the Microsoft Teams. And to begin with, it was calling. We explored a few options with the customer that they brought to us that, hey, why don't we get SBCs on site, deploy with the local SIP providers, or better enough, we have VMs. Why don't we do that? Or there's another option that we could house a colo facility and put in our SBCs and bring in the local providers. But to do that globally for 80 countries is economies of scale. And not only that, it has its own advantages, disadvantages, the main being that you got to manage a lot of that on your own and you have multiple vendors. So Tata Communications has understood similar problems and we have a magic sauce, which I'll cover you in the next couple of slides. What is our architecture that addresses this exact same problem? But in a nutshell, with Tata Communications, you do not have to procure any of this infrastructure or manage with these vendors. So we gave them DIDs, we gave them ported the numbers, we gave them the local emergency services, everything that comes along with your trusted SIP provider, and a lot more. So that takes care of the calling. But how do we do that, right? I mean, the calling. The screen that you see, the slide that you see out here is our global capabilities slide. And what it shows here that is we have POPs everywhere. And these POPs are connected by subsea cabling, like MPLS, private lines, so on. We essentially own the network that we provide to you. And this network is highly resilient. We have 3,000 customers globally that run on the back of this network. And with that, we offer natively 28 countries with Microsoft as a full PSTN replacement. And these are compliant countries, so you are never going to run into a security problem or like local emergency services. So that immediately worked for them, not only because of the scale, but they had cut down, like connecting with at least 28 to 30 different vendors with multiple languages. These are the countries that you could look. We have 17 countries in Europe, about 8 countries in the APAC region, 3 in the North Americas, and we all talked about the global outreach that we have. But on the right-hand side, you see this is powered by 1,600 carriers. And each carrier has their multiple levels of redundancy. In fact, in the last 10 years, we haven't had a single outage across the globe. That speaks volumes to what we offer as a service. And we have 99% money-backed SLAs that we call. So how is that architecture going to look at the customer side, right? Out here, we see 3 blocks. Clearly, the center one is the Microsoft 365. But on the right-hand side, we are a cloud-based connection with them through Azure SIP Proxy. And we connect them at North Americas, EMEA, and in the LATAM. So if out of the 28 countries that we just saw, we did a data mining and the data mapping of the users. And we found that over 70% of their population fell into the PSTN replacement countries. And this streamlined the whole design for us, right? They could use Teams across all the devices. They need not deploy even a single SBC. But out here you see an analog gateway, which I'll come back to it. Their voice traveled over internet and from Microsoft 365 directly to our cloud. France, Italy, Spain, UK, like many of those locations came like within a very short span of time. We could put their numbers and get them up and running. But we also backed them up with professional services and migrations. And for those sites, like when you start discussing where you have a requirement of an SBC, we do provide Teams certified SBC like Russia, China, India, Middle East, Latin America. So you get complete 100% coverage for all of your sites. And this is very important for you because now majority of your population is going to be serviced by us, which you do not even need to deploy any physical hardware. And for those sites, not because of us, but because of compliance, you probably have to deploy a single SBC. So we also ran into one of the major problems that what are we going to do about India? Right? I mean, we all know that India is like a land of compliance and challenges, but we still need to enable Teams for those sites. And the business problem was the users sitting out in India, they had US-based numbers. They took in international calls for inbound and for outbound purposes, and they had to make calls. So this falls under a particular compliance of TRAI called as an IOSP. We worked with them, we worked with Microsoft India, and we worked with the government of India in the past. We have come up with 8 or 9 such scenarios. And for this particular scenario, we have to pull the entire traffic outside of the country on an MPLS private line, break it out to an international and do it with us. I wanted you to take away on this slide is basically we have covered you in India for almost all the situations and the scenarios. It's not as straightforward, but we do cover you for that. How do we do that, right? On the back side of our, how are our service engineers educating them? This is an automated platform that we provide to you. And in this platform, it's for MACD purposes, but think about it. If you have 25,000 users, there's going to be a lot of MACD, and you would need engineers to do PowerShells. You would need them to connect to the SBCs where you need to deploy to them, but manage them on a day-to-day basis. Wouldn't it be nice if you had like a self-service automated platform to do so? There comes Global Rapid platform that we provide to our customers that they would log in with themselves, do changes at their pace, and if they want us to manage it for them, we would gladly do it for you, and we have skills to do that too. Our customer that we are talking about did not do this because we completely managed it for them, but this certainly comes as an offering to folks who want to manage it themselves without having the complete deep skill sets that accompany with managing teams. Then comes, so that took care of all the calling, but we also have video in play. The customer, they had close to 200 room systems that were legacy, like my grandma would be proud that type of legacy, but they still had those, and we had to enable them. We had to sweat their assets, and at the same time procure new room systems for them. We worked with the customer as a consulting arm, identified what room systems they needed. So when they wanted to communicate outside the organization, they were not just restricted to Teams, but it was Zoom, Cisco, Google as well. We probably are the only provider that would connect with Google through Pexit platform in all transparency at the back end. And we can offer you one touch to join. So it made it very simple for the users to come in, log in to their room systems, which was a difficult challenge to do in the past. And we managed this whole room systems on the back end. We did it for them, monitored it, supported them in the in and outs, and also did the cloud video interop. So with a cloud video interop, they could communicate both internally as well as externally for the users. This was one of the single biggest saving exercise because they could let go of the legacy infrastructure through which they had to register on the call control. So it's very important if you want to save costs. Nectar is another tool that we use to monitor for the end devices. And Nectar is a complementary tool for the Microsoft's call CQD. And in that, we achieve analytics that are more actionable, right? You could get alerts. It helps in troubleshooting, isolates the problem faster. And as I said, it's complementary to what CQD has to offer. It gives you a lot more insights that go beyond what the tenant has. Like, for example, even the hardware where the calls are failing or where the video is not turning good, firewall issues, so on and so forth. Adoption is one of the most undermined aspects, as you probably know, right? Adoption is the one that realizes your true vision of what Microsoft Teams does for you. So to complement out here as well with what Microsoft has to offer, we have an adoption practice that is a consulting-led practice. And with that, we develop champions, we lay out the business strategy and develop an adoption strategy. We have gamification. And in that, it actually measures like what tangible outcomes you need to measure, and it gives you qualitative as well as quantitative data. And this goes a long way for enterprises who truly understand what adoption means for them. I know Sandy has a lot of experience with adoption. I was wondering if Sandy, if you want to throw in a couple of points out here.
Yes, I could not agree any more. And when we think about this, it's all about the end user employee experience. And for them to maximize it, it needs to be well structured and starting from the very top. So with that structured plan, so from top down approach and then bottom up, you have to be inclusive and have to share exactly why we're doing it, what we're doing, what's going to be the impact, and then what the outcome is. What's in it for the end user, what's in it for the organization. So I couldn't agree anymore, but you need to be clear of what is in it for everyone, then they can understand and then get on board like your champions.
Right. So this slide essentially brings everything we talked about right now. In the pyramid, in the scale of the pyramid, we certainly at the bottom, we are the enablers, the infrastructure enablers. We use licenses from Microsoft and the expertise that Microsoft has to offer. We are the gold partners with Microsoft, so we have access to like really good resources that Microsoft has to offer. And as we scale up the pyramid, we use tools that work together in tandem with the whole Teams ecosystem. Classic case is PolyPexip that we work for the cloud video interop and for like legacy interop devices. But at the same time, we are not just enabling you for calling or for video, but we provide a whole service wrap that comes with it, an end-to-end managed entity for all of your needs for the collaboration purposes. And this is because we are not only a Teams enabler, but on the back, we have network, we have multiple services that work in tandem. That if you need network to support, or if you need network to for compliance, we work that with Teams. Like for example, in India, when we wanted to launch a Teams enabled a business case that we discussed here, we needed to deploy an MPLS network. We have that MPLS network. We do not need to go and search for vendors, and so on and so forth for security, IoT, SMSs that work with the bots that Sandy talked about. So that was one of our customer journey. But this is another customer that I would quickly touch base upon. It is Pernod Ricard, and they're a wine company, wine and a spirits company. And when they came to us, they were distraughted with the number of acquisitions that they had, which each contained out like multiple different phone systems of their own choice, and they couldn't get all of those working. The good thing was that they standardized on Microsoft Teams as a platform, and they were looking forward to enable Teams on the calling side. So we worked with them. We have tools, and you'll be surprised to know that, like some of the legacy tools for which you need engineers to give you the information, we have automated tools that extract that information from your Avaya IP offices or your Avaya Aura or Cisco or Nortel, Mitel, Siemens, like name you may have. And we could do it in an automated way without the need for resources to validate that. And we could give you an assessment that, hey, this site could be easily migrated. And they love this. Pernod Ricard, the CIO, they love this. They came back to us that you not only reduce the amount of effort required from our side, but you enable us to achieve the goal in a very short span of time. So this is a great case study for us too. At the end of the day, they were able to leverage a lot of our Teams-based platform services, SIP connectivity, the Teams managed services, and all in an automated way. So, Sandy, before I get to this slide, do you want to close on Microsoft's remarks out here?
Yes, no, good timing, Ash. And I think before we go into your next slides there, and then maybe we can wrap up some of the Q&A that's in the board I've seen coming through. And as a reminder to everyone, if you've got any other questions, feel free to put it in the chat on the right-hand side and we'll pick it up. But Ash, importantly, from our side, Microsoft Teams is growing at an incredible rate. We at Microsoft want to continue this push and extend the value that you get. You are our shared valued customers from Tata Communications and Microsoft, and we want to make sure that you maximize your value from it. As you've heard today, to liven up voice and meetings and meeting rooms globally takes a bit more thought. So it's essential to plan and to get the right advice from the valued partner. And that's why people like Tata Communications are the right to talk to. They can provide that skill at scale because we think you'll have a great experience with Teams. Anyway, I think that's enough for me. Back to you, Ash. But it's super important partnership for us into our end customers.
Yeah, and we have this Tata Communications trial, and in this trial, what you're going to get is you would get DIDs that you could choose from the list of countries I shared with you earlier. You could use them on the tenant, on your tenant, and essentially try a full-fledged production pilot on your side. It is very easy. It takes less than a day to set it up completely, and it's scalable, right? I mean, down the line, you decide to go full-fledged production with this. You could scale from 5 users to 5,000 users, or you could scale it back, up, down. So that's a very easy way for you to get ingested into this system. But keep us in mind when we offer this trial, right? I mean, it's not just restricted to calling. It's the whole gamut of services that I talked to you about, that wherever you have a need, we can fill in those gaps, but it's more important to understand overall what value Tata brings to you. So take questions from here, question and answers.
Yep. So Ash, while you come off that, I can dive in. There's 4 or 5 questions that have come through the Q&A board. I've got one that looks quite interesting for you around. So we talked about voice and meetings, meeting rooms. So what other additional services can Tata Communications bring to kind of complement this whole productivity story?
I think it's a great question. I wish somebody asked, and I'm glad that was my first question. Network is essentially very important, right? I mean, we have a customer, they wanted to manage us 5,000 endpoints. And for us to manage those 5,000 endpoints that at a later stage might include CVI as well, we needed a way to get into the network. And we have a network. We have we have connected with them through an NNI, and that allows us to reach to their rooms globally in a compliant manner. Now, you would question that when we reached in through the network, like what's the security? We have a security practice too that allows us to connect in a DMZ manner so that their network is completely separate from us, but we connected on the management plane. There was an SMS utility too. I think Sandy talked about that, hey, could develop bots. And what if the bots could eventually send an SMS? We have that partnership. We have IoT in our space where you could send an SMS through the bots to different applications. Some of our customers are exploring that as a thing. There is contact center as well. In fact, Tata Communications through Enghouse, we provide you Teams contact center capabilities. And that's one of the only vendors in the market that does that. So if you have an IT help desk and it's more of like an evolved contact center type functionality, but you still want to use Teams for that, we do offer you on that. So, and hand in glove, right? Microsoft and us are tied with the first that we develop in the market for all these connectivity purposes. Operator Connect, when it released, we were again one of the launch partners for that. We have it in our portfolio already. Conferencing in India has historically been a problem. So we are one of the only players in the market that enable conferencing, Teams conferencing in India at a scale. For that, you certainly need to have a little bit more conditions, like you need your EA to be in India, so on and so forth. We can certainly discuss that if you can connect back to us.
Cool. And so, Ash, while you mentioned India, it's good because there's actually a question about regulated spaces. Maybe you can touch on that. So how does Tata Communications operate? I know you've touched on it before, but there's another question to maybe just reiterate how you operate in the highly regulated markets.
I'll begin with India because that's clearly a very common question that I have. In India, the regulation is revolving around the toll fraud and the registration of the users, right? I mean, the toll fraud states that if you are a user from a particular state, when you make a call, the call has to be local to that particular geographic vicinity. It cannot travel from one state to the other. For example, if I'm from Mumbai and if I want to make a call, I can use the infrastructure that I have in Mumbai within my geography, but if I travel to Pune or if I travel to outside of the state, I may not be able to tap, and that would make it illegal. So we have what we call as location-based routing. We use that. It's a Microsoft enabled feature, but at the same time, we provide you audit and compliance. There are codes that we need to leverage on the SBCs to do that. That's one aspect of it. Then there is also an aspect that we need to enable remote workers, or we need to enable businesses who have international numbers. We run into OSP situations very fast. OSP is other services providers, and that's one of the regulations of India that comes into play. We have identified about 10 or 12 different scenarios, and I'm happy to walk you through that. You can connect me via LinkedIn, or you could connect us through our corporate communication out here. We can talk through those. They also touched base on China. Like China too, it's a gray area, and I can tell you this in confidence because I've run into many instances in China. While in China you do not have a geographic restriction, you still need location-based routing. And it's a gray area because your carriers may or may not support you. You might run into that more often than not than you realize it. You may be able to port the numbers, but the same carrier with the PRI might not be able to port those numbers. So we work a lot of that, so on and so forth.
Good, super interesting. There's another question, actually, I think it's probably aimed at me, to be fair, Ash, which is how is Microsoft continuing to advance Teams as a platform? So I'll take that one because it's probably aimed at me. Is that yes, we see that as a platform for your work environment, workspace, and to use my phrase, was kind of the window pane into your work life. There's many different things that we plug into Teams. Ash has mentioned contact center, really important part. Whether that's kind of the simple end through Teams itself natively, or the higher end as you described, with a kind of a more enriched experience. So that could be, that Teams could be that front page or that kind of platform for that as well. So let's not exclude these things. But then importantly, around the developments, around the kind of it's surfacing some of those line of business applications through there. We have hundreds of applications that are already working through Teams, hundreds and hundreds of applications. So for example, rival CRM tools that are rival to Microsoft 365 Dynamics that can be surfaced through Teams, through the APIs, and that's the way we operate. We want to operate in a very open environment to enable those to allow the APIs or give the APIs out to enable third-party apps to be surfaced through this. But then, as I mentioned earlier on, interesting other developments, things like the low-code, no-code kind of options of actually how can you then invent your own things? What is the art of the possible? And we want to make that as easy as possible to do your own kind of platform developments, or as Ash mentioned, slightly more complex ones. Get the right partner to do it. Get Tata Communications in to do those things. I mean, I love that example about the kind of the SMS functionality. Really cool. So things like that are highly impactful from a platform perspective. Yeah,
Sandy, I'm seeing one more question come up.
Yep.
Has which verticals do you think is Microsoft seeing that has adopted Teams most? Like which industry verticals?
Yeah, interesting question. I'll answer this in two ways, and not to avoid the question. From an enterprise space, we're seeing a broad adoption across the board, first of all. So I mentioned 115 million daily active users earlier on, and that's just not growing massively. From a sector perspective, manufacturing's been very quick to historically been very quick to use Teams and enable Teams, particularly at that kind of frontline worker space. So people who are mobile only workers because the world's changed. But generically, a lot of the other enterprise spaces, particularly the finance, FSI, has caught up very, very fast and is probably outpacing manufacturing now because of the whole kind of work from home and continued work from home. The second half of the answer, which I know is kind of a very different market segment, is things like education. The amount of education users out there, universities, high schools, elementary schools, or kind of lower age schools are all a lot of those are adopting Teams as well. I speak from personal experience that I have 3 daughters, 3 of them were being educated all day long on Teams. So education is another big market segment as well. But yeah, for men's space, kind of for certainly financials and manufacturing.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, what workload in Teams are these industries adopting? Because I see a lot of manufacturing and the financial services too, and they have started asking us a lot of questions around like Teams calling, and like for the video is picked up a lot. Just did an RFP for like 5,000 room systems, which we are working on. There's one that sold like for large number of room systems too. What is your take on that?
I agree with you. So there's huge usage around all the basic functionality around Teams. Meetings and video has just gone through the roof in the last few months because of how we all operate. And then that's changing as we talked about. So that your comment there around the kind of RFP for room systems, that's what I'm seeing all the time now, because people are getting ready for going back to work and getting people to continue enjoying Teams. Right. So that's some of the key ones, and then voice as well, because touching on the point I made earlier on, there's a lot of non-fit for purpose legacy PBXs or legacy unified comms infrastructure out there. 75% of our enterprise customers still have on-premise, and they've gone, you know what, don't need that anymore. We've moved to the cloud in the last 12 months. Let's move everything to the cloud. So it's probably key workloads. Yeah.
I am trying to see if we have any more new questions. I think this is the end of it. Cool. I don't know. Janice, do you want to take over from here?
All right. Thank you, Ash. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to conclude today's web conference. Before we sign off here, I'm going to post a link in the Q&A panel. And that is going to be a link to a short survey for this conference, and we ask that you please take a moment to fill it out. We'd like your feedback on today's session and also what you'd like to hear about when we do future events. We do appreciate the time you take to do this, and thank you for your support. The recording and a copy of the presentation will be available within 48 hours via the same registration link used to attend today's live broadcast. I'd like to extend a big thank yous to our presenters, Sandy and Ash, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today.
All right. Thank you.